The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And it is
The last
Monday of the decade.
And the last show of 2019.
And the last show of the decade.
Yes.
So.
Well, there's some dispute about that.
What?
Because they said there was no year zero. So they said the new decade doesn't start until 21.
Oh, horseman.
Hey, people need to have a fight about something.
In order to get to 10, you have to count the zero as a year, right? Otherwise, there wouldn't be 10 years in a decade.
Exactly.
Because you'd never have a decade. You'd only a decade.
People have to fight about something.
A decade would be 9 years rather than 10 years. So with that, okay, it is another the Riv. A year later, vehicle storage proposal for Weaver's Cove returns. Everything, like bad pennies in Fall River,
Yep.
Everything comes back.
Well, that's because the ZBA doesn't do anything legally.
That's right.
The problem.
Well, it's Fall River.
Right.
And they don't do it, and it's an ongoing story, and I know you touched upon it in your weekend flush.
Yes, I did.
And so everybody got a really good bird's eye view, but this is like a soap opera. It just continues. So we have to wait.
Well, and as I said in the flush, if you appeal every single decision that the ZBA makes in the Superior Court, their decisions will be overturned. Because again, there's only two reasons that they can grant a variance. That is for topography and land. That's it. And soil conditions. So, you don't have anything.
So the moral of that story is they never do anything right.
No.
And that's what you said. In a legal sense, you explained it to them, but the reality is they don't. So now we've got homeless.
Massachusetts is number one.
Yeah, the increase of 17%, but that's only because places like New York and California already have so many that the percentages won't go up that drastically because there's hundreds of thousands of them.
But oddly enough, California's number of homelessness went down. Now, here's the issue, okay?
Yeah, that's because a lot of them
they all moved to Pelosi's.
overdosed.
They all moved to Pelosi's house.
They overdosed. And look, this is, I just watched de Blasio blaming everybody but himself, the worst mayor in the history of New York City, and they blame everybody. Pelosi now all of a sudden it's Trump's problem, not the governor, not for allowing them sanctuary cities and half of these populations are probably illegals. So, the whole thing is just, it's an absurdity.
Well, I just think it's interesting because Massachusetts is number one here, 2,503, an increase of about 14% for this of overall increase.
Yeah.
Now, the states with the biggest overall decrease was California's number one, about 1%. But states with the largest increase in homeless veterans, this pisses me off.
Yep.
Massachusetts, 132, an increase of about 16%. God forbid you're a veteran in Massachusetts. We have all these great programs for veterans except housing.
Yeah, and those programs are not as great as they say. But as you said, some of these things are appalling, but these figures aren't even accurate. It's like the city budget. Any similarity between it, because half of these illegals aren't factored in because they're phantoms, they're persona non grata. So we can't, and this we'll circle back to this, but I guess we got a comment from one of our viewers about our, I don't know what you would call it, because
Jared on TV, I believe it was.
Well, yeah, and yes. he said something about we don't see anything. What was it? You have to, because you see with me, I don't really read that stuff. CJ does, and he recounts it to me because he knows that. Number one, anything that we give on this show, I'm going to either give you facts, which I will give you very shortly, or it will be my opinion. And when it comes to my opinion, I always preface it by saying, I don't care if you agree with it or not.
That's right.
So stuff like this doesn't really bother me, but but we will respond to it because we're going to make our point, because many times our position is misconstrued because everybody likes to label people as negative or obstructionists. Anybody that doesn't bury their head in the sand like an ostrich and pretend everything's all right and has that report from the Chamber of Commerce that says Fall River's a low crime area and has a pristine waterfront framed right next to the picture of JFK. We're radical, secessionists. We're not looking at anything objectively.
Secede from the Union.
But that's who we are. Because I hate to tell you this, whoever you are from TV.
Jared on TV.
But CJ and I choose to stay in this city and attempt to try to change it for the better. And I'll preface my remarks by saying that we've never said, well, obviously we care about the city, and there are a lot of good people in the city of Fall River, and I know a lot of good people. But the problem is a lot of good people have moved out of the city of Fall River for the reasons. We look at the city, it's kind of like being an alcoholic or a drug addict. You can't fix your problem until you acknowledge it. If you continue to drink the Kool-Aid and try to rationalize everything in your favor and not look at it objectively, we never get anything fixed. So what was the general gist of his comment that we were like, we can't see anything good in Fall River? Well, I see a lot of good in Fall River. I see a lot of good people. I see a good location. But I see a city that's deteriorated drastically over the past 15 years or so, or maybe even 20. But the last 10 years have been drastic reductions. So you talked about the Flint business area. CJ, come on. We were accurate. I guess we had the mayor of the Flint in earlier. Those storefronts, even if they weren't either condemned or needed so much upgrade to come into code compliance that nobody who's going to move into Fall River and looking for a TIF and is running a business on a shoestring would come here, people are not going to come to Fall River. CJ, you're moving around in there. I didn't hear a comment on that, but
Well, no, I'm here. I was trying to bring up Jared on TV's comment, and I was just talking with Carlos about that because another business just left Pleasant Street. They bought the old Lindo's Cafe to open there, and the problem that they have there is there's no parking. But again, the reason why he left, the owner of the building wasn't making repairs. The ceiling was falling in on it, and it's a restaurant.
Yeah.
And he had in his lease in the contract that the owner would repair the building. Well, he's not repairing the building, and this is the problem with most of the buildings down there. Now, do you remember the old Amazonia building?
yeah.
Okay, Amazonia Clothing. I bought a couple of suits there when I was younger. And when they condemned that building, there were tenants up on top of it. And they were Section 8 tenants.
Yeah,
They were Section 8
waiting
tenants.
for different Section 8 housing. That's the only reason they were there. So.
So it just gets to be ridiculous.
But, regardless of that, they're going to say, well, you guys are there, people living up there. That's right. People living in many apartments in Fall River that are not up to code.
That's right.
So, again, we get the old Jambi rationalization, two wrongs make a right. So we don't care if it's not up to code. These people are living in squalor or in places with substandard electricity and plumbing or whatever. But let me get to facts now. These are all, big opinions. And there are variances in these numbers I'm going to read if you go to other sources. But I always use, and you can go look at it, the United States Census Bureau. So you and I and Jared, let's be objective. Let's pretend, let's play let's pretend. We're businessmen, and we're looking at a place to locate our business. And we actually have a pretty good business. We're not running on a shoestring. We don't need a TIF. So what does a good businessman look at? They look at the market. They look at for their target demographic. They look for people who will purchase their service or product.
People have money.
People with money. So let me give you the latest that I got this morning from the United States Census Bureau. I'll give you what I did was I gave you a comparison of Fall River and New Bedford, which are, Fall River is the lowest. You know, I could have stuck Lowell, but they're all the same. Lowell, Lawrence, Fall River, New Bedford. They're all fundamentally in the ballpark. So I gave you Fall River and our sister city, New Bedford. And then I gave you the state average. And I gave you the two most affluent cities of our size. I didn't bring Boston in. Newton, my favorite always, Newton, and Cambridge. All these cities are approximately the size of Fall River. Newton's got a couple thousand less people. New Bedford's got about 5,000 more than we do. Cambridge about 5,000 more than we do. But we're ballpark. They're in our universe, so to speak. So let's compare. You're a businessman and you want to come to a place. And you want to employ people too. That's a big factor. Employable people. And by the way, I just saw a statistic from the former Secretary of Labor that said there are over 7 million unfilled jobs in the United States right now because they need a modicum of education and some training. So that's what, you know, progressive cities are doing. So let's look at these cities. You want to come to Fall River. First, Fall River, we have a high school education, which is even sub-baseline today. Fall River has 73.2% of their population are high school graduates.
That's better than 20 years ago.
That's right. But we had mills and low-paying jobs.
Right.
That's the problem. New Bedford has 75% of their population with a high school education. So right there, if you need a little bit of technical skill or a little advanced skill, it shrunk the labor force. Now comes the comparison. Newton, 97.3% of the people in Newton have a high school education. 97.3. Cambridge, 95.1. Now we get the people with a bachelor's or better. Fall River, one of the lowest in the state, if not the lowest, because I didn't check Lawrence and Lowell today, I didn't have time. 15.1% of the population has a bachelor's or better. New Bedford, 17.1, 2% more. Newton, 77.5%. More than 3/4 of their population is college educated. And what goes along with a college degree? A better salary. Cambridge, 77.4, 1/10 less. More than 3/4 of their population, again, with a bachelor's or better. So let's get to so there you go. So now I'm as an employer looking at what community I can go to get some people who can work in my place. So I'm looking at a place where I got almost 100% of the population with a high school education and more than 3/4 of the population with a college education. a bachelor's degree, not an associate, a bachelor's. So now I'm looking at my consumer base. So I'm going to look at the income levels in these cities. Fall River's household income, and this is up, according to their stats, because this is a known, it used to be like 34, 30. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, I've seen lower estimates, but right now, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, the household income in the city of Fall River is $41,585. The household income in New Bedford is $43,989. The national average, the state average of Massachusetts is 77,378, which is a lot more. Yeah, you know, 30 over 30, 30 about 35, you know, about 3,000, you know, $33,500. That's a lot of money. So, 30,500. So, the national average is 60,000. So we're below everything. National average, state average, well below by a lot. The household average income in Newton, remember, Fall River 41, New Bedford 43. We're rounded. 139,696. Do the math. More than 3 times what we have in Fall River. So they got a lot more money to buy. Cambridge, 95,000. Individual income, 24,600 in Fall River, 25,000 in New Bedford, 69,859 in Newton, and 54 in Cambridge. National average, 32, we're 12,000, we're 8,000 below. 41 in the state per capita. Here's the other one. Poverty level, 19.4% in Fall River. That means like 1 out of every 5 people in Fall River is living below the poverty level. The national average is 11.8. The state average is 10. New Bedford actually has a higher poverty. That was a surprising statistic today. And I'm not going to just give the 21.1 in New Bedford living below the poverty level. Newton, 4.3. About 5 times less. Cambridge, 13. That's fairly high, but Cambridge has a lot of people that work marginal jobs around the colleges. Now, let's do the mathematics of business. Everybody talks about economic development, and we continue to tell you they're all full of crap. Because first you gotta develop our workforce. Businesses in Fall River, 5,214. Businesses in New Bedford, 5,572. Ready? Hold on to your seat, Jared. Here we come. Newton, 13,744. 13,000. What's 5 times 3? 15. More than 3 times the amount of businesses. Why? Same size city. We should have we should be within the ballpark. Why? Because people do not come to Fall River to open up a business. Nobody's got any damn money. We're not being negative. We're not being we're being objective and pragmatic. We can't fix the problem until we face reality, and we never face reality in this city. I presented these, well, not these statistics, but the U.S. Census Bureau statistics 4 or 5 years ago in front of the city council. Did one of those counselors ever, and as a matter of fact, Steve Long read them 6 months later. Have they ever done anything about it? Have they ever admitted the fact that all this is just BS that they're shoving down your throat, pretending that this city has got a pristine waterfront and it's a low-crime city and we can bring business in here? There's a reason why the only businesses we can't get into this, that we can get into the city, the people who are looking for tips, and they go out like their butts are on fire as soon as their TIF runs out. This city cannot attract any real solid business with a business plan because business people look at these numbers. Maybe you don't, maybe our city council doesn't, maybe our mayor doesn't, but we do. And I'm not saying it because I like to say it. I wish I could say something different. But I'm not going to bury my head in the sand. I'm not going to pretend that all is good. Is Fall River a great location? Yeah. Is Fall River got a lot of good people? Yeah. But I'm not going to BS myself or BS anybody that's watching this program about reality. That's a dose of pragmatism. So, you know, and we got the mayor of Flint standing right here in the studio. He'll tell you the difficulty, and there's nobody that works harder than Carlos at trying to bring people to the Flint. And I give him credit. It's a thankless job. And it's a job that's virtually impossible to do.
And he's unpaid.
And he's unpaid. And kudos to you, Carlos, because I commend you. You're doing your part, but it's a hard part to do because we can't fix this. It's like a junkie that doesn't want to get off drugs. It's like an alcoholic that doesn't admit he's an alcoholic. This city has gotten worse and worse because nobody pays attention to reality. And this is the reality. The numbers do not lie.
And the reality is that it's your fault. The viewers' fault because you keep re-electing the same people who do nothing, who hide their head in the sand. If they know these numbers, they ignore them. Because you know that our federal delegation know all these numbers. They were presented because they want them. But do they say, well, let's see what we can do for Fall River, let's see what Fall River can do for us? No, we don't get that. Well, the only time you see a member of your federal delegation is when? Election time. So next year, in a couple of days, you're going to start seeing them. They're going to be all over Fall River. Just like you saw Kennedy down here recently because he's going to make a Senate run or whatever. Hey. He knows that Fall River is only good for votes, and he's got Fall River already written off that we've got all the votes in Fall River we need. No Republican's going to get them because the people in Fall River, and I'm going to quote what I heard from a politician, the people in Fall River are stupid. They don't vote with their head. They vote with their heart, and that's the problem you have.
Or their stomach.
Yeah, or their
like
stomach.
the old adage, an army moves on its stomach.
Yeah.
Well, the Fall River voters move on their chow mein sandwiches.
Exactly.
And, but look, as I said, we're pragmatists. I'm not pretending, and I'm not saying we could ever be Newton or Cambridge. Newton is a suburb of Boston where all the well-educated people who work in Boston run at the end of the day to go into the burbs. We're never going to be a Newton. You know, if you're born a penny, you're never going to be a silver dollar, to quote an adage that was on Monty Ferris, the man who started the Venus de Milo, had in his caricature at his office, and it said a lot. Because one thing about Mr. Monty Ferris, he was a man who gave a lot of money to charity, especially the Shriners. He was a man who never forgot where he came from and helped all his friends who were less fortunate than he. And that's the reason that caricature was built. But listen, we're never going to be a Newton. We're not going to be a Cambridge. Harvard is in Cambridge, MIT's in Cambridge. All the businesses that can't fit into Boston are over the bridge on the other side of the Charles.
Kendall Square.
Yeah, exactly. But look, we could become another we could go back in time. Fall River there wasn't a store that was empty on Pleasant Street when we grew up. There wasn't a store on South Main Street that was empty. And did we have 77.5 and 77.4 college-educated people? No. We had a whole ton of people who were immigrants, most of whom had virtually no education, working in mills. But then, like malls, eliminated stores, and then now online shopping is killing malls. The trades that need virtually no education, they went to North Carolina, now they're overseas. So we had to adjust and look at the times and adjust with the time. Did we begin apprenticeship programs? Did we begin to look at the nation and say, well, what kind of jobs are available? Not for people with a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD, but what are people with a high school diploma, how are they being employed? Vocational education, medium tech education. Did we begin at any time to do that in the city of Fall River? No. All they did was whine about the mills leaving and oh me, oh my, and we're going to develop our economy. But they didn't. All they did was say, we're going to develop our economy with no plan, because the only thing that will develop our economy will be when we get people back to work. When we had people working in Fall River with no education, there wasn't an empty store on Pleasant Street, and there wasn't an empty store on South Main Street. But does your city council ever do anything to help the average worker? Do they do anything to help bring people into this city who have a skill? Why don't they give TIFs to people who are going to buy a house? Oh, you got a good job? You're willing to commute up to wherever, out to Electric Boat or wherever, but you want to live in Fall River? Come live in Fall River. We're going to give you some benefits for living here. We need to change the demographic. We cannot have 19.4 people living below the poverty level. We can't have an individual income that's less than half of what the state average is. So that's it. CJ's waving his finger at me, but it's not the middle one. We got 1 minute. So hey, look, that's the reality, and we're not being negative. We stayed in Fall River. A lot of these people that are reaping the benefits of the TIFs they bailed. We haven't bailed. We're sitting here fighting the fight like Carlos Caesar is.
Look at Light O'Lear. Light O'Lear was here for a while. Their TIFs ran out, and they finally found out that they can't continue business here because it's costing them too much. And what did they do? They left. And now we've got a big windmill that doesn't even move, sitting there doing nothing. Okay, as a reminder to the people of Fall River, you've got nothing to offer except for TIFs. And the sad part about it is our city council, the TIF board, the mayor, acting mayor, the previous mayors, they all hand out these TIFs, and they keep forgetting that we, the residential taxpayer, have to pay it. And then we get nothing from it. Nothing at all. So let's start the 2020 out with the new mantra. Hold them accountable. Make them vote for what you need and not for what a business needs. Let's work towards a 1.75 tax factor. Don't buy the bullshit that comes out of Carl Hetzler's mouth. Don't buy the bull that comes out of the Chamber of Commerce mouth. This is time for the people to start speaking up. It's time for a revolution.
That's right. And we're going to start a new decade and a new year. We'll see you next year, and it's an election year. So let's do what we can as Americans, which is make our representatives represent us. Make them fix Fall River, because they won't do it unless you make them do it. And anybody that wants to run for office, contact us. The Citizens Alliance for Accountability of Government will be recruiting candidates for all city offices who want to represent the people, and we will help you. We will help you.
It's time for a true, clean sweep in all our elected officials.
It's time for a revolution.
That's right. Happy New Year, everyone. We'll see you next year.
See you next year, next decade.